Every empire you admire was built on something ugly. Not wisdom, not greatness, but blood. The statues don't show it. The textbooks avoid it. But behind every golden age was a pile of bodies enslaved, conquered, erased. Tonight, we strip away the romance and expose the truth behind the world's most celebrated ancient empires. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. History loves winners. It polishes their crimes into strategy. It turns slaughter into expansion. And it calls survival divine favor. Ancient empires weren't built by brilliance alone. They were built by fear, systematic violence, and absolute domination. And the uncomfortable truth is this: most modern civilizations still benefit from those foundations. We tell ourselves stories about heroic founders and wise leaders, but what if those stories are just a cover-up? What if the monuments we marvel at are actually memorials to crimes we've agreed to forget? The truth is, building an empire has never been a clean process. It's always been about taking land, taking resources, and taking lives. That's the lie we're going to dismantle, one empire at a time. Let's start with Egypt. We see the majestic pyramids, the powerful gods, and a story of eternal order. But that order came at a cost. The pyramids weren't miracles of inspiration. They were machines of human exhaustion. Imagine tens of thousands of laborers working under brutal conditions, controlled by a rigid class system that treated human lives as replaceable tools. Pharaohs weren't just kings. They were gods on earth. To question them wasn't rebellion, it was heresy. And that stability, the kind that lasted for millennia, wasn't enforced with kindness. It was enforced with obedience, and obedience was enforced with punishment. Egypt lasted because it crushed dissent early and efficiently. The grandeur of the Nile was built on the backs of countless nameless people whose only purpose was to serve, build, and die for a system that saw them as nothing more than instruments. Now let's talk about the empire that didn't even pretend to be humane: Assyria. The Assyrians mastered one thing better than anyone else: terror. They didn't hide their brutality. They carved it into stone for everyone to see. Their palace reliefs show prisoners being flayed alive, impaled, and decapitated in horrifying detail. Cities were wiped out not just for resistance, but to make an example of them. This wasn't random rage. It was a calculated strategy. Fear traveled faster than armies. Many cities surrendered without even putting up a fight, not because Assyria was so strong, but because the alternative, resistance, meant complete annihilation. They understood that the psychological impact of terror could conquer a territory before a single soldier even arrived. And that raises a chilling question that still haunts modern warfare. If terror works, is it wrong? From Assyria, we move to Babylon, the civilization that gave us laws, written justice, and the idea of a structured society. But let's look closer at Hammurabi's code. It wasn't about fairness for all. It was about control. The punishments were brutal, unequal, and strictly class-based. An elite man could destroy a poor man's life and walk away with just a fine, but a poor man could lose a hand for a minor theft committed just to survive. Justice existed, but only for those the system deemed worth protecting. The code was a tool to maintain the existing power structure, not to create equality. Babylon didn't civilize violence. It legalized it. It wrapped brutality in the language of law, making it an official part of the state. And once violence is legalized, it becomes permanent, a foundation of the society itself. Next up, ancient Greece, praised as the birthplace of democracy and philosophy. But here's the part of the story that's rarely said, that's celebrated. Democracy applied to a very small fraction of the population: women, excluded, slaves. They were considered property, not people, foreigners. Disposable. The great city of Athens ran on forced labor. Philosophy and art flourished because someone else was carrying the burden, toiling in the fields and mines. And what about Sparta, the ultimate symbol of discipline and martial prowess? It was a society that trained for war from childhood. Weakness was systematically eliminated. Mercy was seen as a flaw. The brilliance of Greece didn't float serenely above the violence of the world. It stood directly on top of it, supported by a foundation of exclusion and exploitation. And then there's Rome. Rome perfected the art of domination. They didn't just conquer lands. They completely reshaped societies. Rebellion was punished publicly and brutally. Crucifixion wasn't a rare event. It was a routine form of state terror, a public spectacle designed to enforce obedience. Entire populations were enslaved after a conquest. Cities that resisted were erased from the map, only to be rebuilt with Roman names and Roman culture. And yet, how do we remember Rome? For its roads, its laws, its aqueducts, its architecture, because impressive infrastructure is a great way to distract from oppression. Rome didn't fall because it was cruel. It fell because cruelty, over centuries, eventually turns inward. The same violence used to control its subjects ultimately consumed the empire from within. Sound familiar? Here's the uncomfortable pattern that connects all of these empires. Empires must expand. Expansion requires force, and applying force on a massive scale demands dehumanization. You can't enslave or conquer a people if you see them as your equals. So they are labeled less than, as barbarians, as savages, as uncivilized. Once that label is applied, anything becomes justified. Religion helps, ideology helps, national pride helps. Suddenly, violence isn't just a tool. It becomes a sacred duty, a civilizing mission, and the scariest part. Every single one of these empires believed it was different. Every empire believed its own violence was necessary, righteous, and for the greater good. They all told themselves a story that made them the heroes. We like to believe we're more enlightened now. We're past all that, right? But look around. Borders are enforced with violence. Resources are extracted from weaker nations under the guise of trade. History is constantly being rewritten to protect the powerful and justify their actions. The tools have changed, sure. We have different weapons and new ideologies, but the core logic, it hasn't changed at all. The ancient empires didn't just disappear. They evolved. Their methods, their justifications, and their patterns of behavior are still with us, just wearing modern clothes. We are still living in the world they built, and we're still grappling with the same dark impulses. So next time you stand in awe of an ancient ruin or admire the achievements of a great empire, ask yourself this: who paid the price for that greatness? Who were the people whose names were never recorded, whose suffering was the foundation for that glory? Because history doesn't repeat itself quietly. It repeats itself when we refuse to look at it honestly, and the blood that was spilled to build civilization, it was never truly washed away. Thanks for watching. If this made you think, make sure to follow for more.